Good afternoon. My name's Tam Menneer. I'm a research fellow on the Smartline project, and I, together with Andrew Williams in a moment, are going to be telling you about the Smartline data and also some of the applications that we're working on. So the Smartline data come from 300 homes across Cornwall. We have housing data, such as the type of property, whether it's a house or a flat and so on, the levels of insulation within the property and the type of heating that they have. We also have the survey data, including information about well-being and health of the occupants, whether there's mould in the property, their heating and ventilation habits, plus a lot more information from the survey. The sensors provide us with internal and external readings of relative humidity, temperature, air quality, and we also have measurements from electricity, gas, and water usage. In a subset of the homes, we have qualitative information from a semi-structured guided conversation that includes people's views on their well-being, their home, and their local community. So here I have a couple of example graphs from the sensor data from one of the Smartline homes, giving the relative humidity and the temperature. The readings are taken every 3 to 5 minutes, and in some cases go back to October 2017. One of the areas of research that we're interested in looking at is the factors that affect mould growth in the home. So mould growth can have an impact on health and exacerbate diseases such as asthma and other respiratory diseases. Mould growth is exacerbated by many factors, but a lot of those factors contribute to the humidity levels within the house, such as water leaks, the methods of cooking, whether we dry washing on radiators, and so on. And the humidity levels that are generally considered to impact on mould growth or on health are around 60 to 75% relative humidity. However, there's been a laboratory study that's shown if the relative humidity fluctuates a lot, so that you've got short, frequent bursts of high humidity, then there's less mould growth than if you've got longer cycles and longer drawn-out periods of high humidity. And we're interested to know whether that finding from the lab generalises to a real home setting. So we're taking the relative humidity sensor data and modelling how much that humidity fluctuates in the homes, and we want to see whether the homes that have short cycles, high frequency cycles, have less mould than those that have longer cycles, to see whether that lab finding actually holds true in a real life setting. We're also, as we heard a bit from Tim Taylor earlier, looking at an existing model of mould growth called the VTT model, which takes relative humidity and temperature data and predicts a level of mould growth within in a certain environment. This model was developed on surface readings from wood and has been developed under controlled conditions. And we want to know, does this generalise to the real life setting, to the home environment? So here I have the in the top plot the relative humidity and temperature for one of the Smartline properties. And the black line shows the critical relative humidity level from the VTT model, above which mould growth generally starts to begin. The bottom plot shows the predicted mould level using the VTT model on those measurements. So we can see that in the bottom plot, when the mould prediction starts to grow with the red line, when the relative humidity, again the red line in the top plot, goes above that critical level, and it starts to decline when the relative humidity drops below that critical level. So from the Smartline data, we have relative humidity and temperature readings in the living room and in the bedroom, and we can feed those into this VTT model to see whether there's see what the predicted mould is in those rooms. And then we can verify those predictions using the survey responses. So do people actually say, when we're predicting mould, do they say that they have got mould or a mouldy smell present in those rooms in the house? And we found that the predictions do coincide with people's responses. So a higher prediction does coincide with the response of mold presence in the home. So the VTT model is a promising approach for the Smartline data, even though those data are taken from the air rather than from surfaces on which the model was based in the first place. So we're developing that model further to make it more appropriate for air measurements, and ultimately we aim to develop and publish a model that will allow us to understand how to control relative humidity, to minimise mold growth, but also take into account factors like human comfort as well. One of the Smartline objectives is to support small to medium businesses in Cornwall, and another example of our research comes from our work with the Smart Home Company, who develop systems for smart control in homes. So we're looking at the temperature data alongside the gas and electricity usage data to find out how much energy people could save if they had smart control of their heating. In order to be able to generalise across the 300 homes, we grouped the homes together into certain types, and we used machine learning cluster analysis to do that, looking at factors that would influence heating within the home, such as the level of insulation or the age of the occupants. The analysis resulted in groups of homes that are similar to each other in terms of these factors, but also capture differences between those groups as well. So, for example, the first group here represents one working-age adult living in a flat who heats and ventilates in few rooms, and the fifth group represents those families with children. Having established those different home types and the ways with the factors that might affect heating, we can then summarise the sensor data according to those groups. So here I have an example with the temperature in the living room across the different groups at different times of day. Oops. Preview of Andrews. So we've got group C has low temperatures, and this is the group that has the lower levels of insulation across the properties. And then group F with the highest temperatures represent the elderly adults who spend more than 20 hours a day at home. So when it comes to energy savings, grouping the homes together in this way can help us understand what kinds of homes might benefit from smart or regulated control of their heating. So I've given some example applications that we're working on, and now Andrew's going to say a bit more about how the Smartline data are being used. Thank you.
Thank you, Tam. So you've heard about predominantly the sensor data from Tam. I wanted to talk to you about the survey data. Many of the people in the room spent quite a lot of our time out and about in Camborne, normally in the rain, collecting lots of survey data, and we produced a beautiful data set. But that's great for people like me who crunch these numbers, or for Tam. But to help businesses and help everybody else engage with this data, we wanted to start learning about the people again. How can we start getting back at the people? And thankfully, a member of our team used to be a market researcher, Emma. So we suddenly came across the idea of personas and archetypes. And I want to talk to you about how we've kind of implemented that within the Smartline project. So many companies use personas to typify their customers and learn about how to target them. And this is just an example I managed to find online of 3 personas that were being used by one company. I specifically chose the term archetypes when it came to Smartline because when the concept of archetypes was created, they recognised that there was going to be variation. We're not talking about stereotypes. We don't want to stereotype our participants. There's variation within those archetypes, and anybody that's read the great stats book, The Tiger That Isn't, will have heard of the white rainbow. If you just look at averages, if you take an average rainbow, it's white. You've lost all the beauty, all the interesting things about it. So we're still trying to dive into the variation within our participants. So that's why we're called Archetypes. And then one of the kind of dirty words for a little while was this one, or dirty acronyms. So, of course, we're not in a position to be able to hand out people's data. That's completely inappropriate. We were given a really privileged position of being able to go into people's homes. Many of us, like Tim, have characters that are still stuck in our heads from that experience, and that's what's motivating us within this project. We don't want to disclose their data. We can't disclose their data. So what's a way that we can share the information we have, put the person at the centre of what we're doing, like Ian said, but still keep it private, So what we did was apply the same machine learning clustering technique that Tam spoke about just now, and you can learn more about that in one of the workshops, to the survey data set, so looking at the people, not at the homes, and we came across these 8 people. So these are the 8 most common types of people within the Smartline data set. They're now in very nice cards at the back, and I was kind of pleased earlier to hear that mind reading is a superpower, because you can come and test my mind reading capabilities at the back later, and I will try and guess which one of the archetypes you've picked up from our table. But these are our 8 archetypes, and I'm going to dive into Mandy. So archetype number 3. Mandy, here she is. She represents about 8% of our participants. She's white, Cornish female, in her kind of late 30s to early 50s. And she's a single mum, lives at home with an adolescent. So we can kind of picture that life. You've got a grumpy teenager at home. Have that in your head. She's self-employed or might be doing some freelance work. She might be looking after the family, or she might be on long-term sick. So this is some of the variation within Mandy's archetype. This is a group of people, not one person. She says her home's cold, and she's only able to heat certain rooms within that home. So that's something we can bear in mind. And she's got poor mental health and well-being. These are all things we were able to look at in the survey. Have you got a picture of somebody like Mandy in your head? Is that somebody you can kind of imagine out there? Thanks to the Smartline project, we've not just got this data, so we can then go into the sensors. So we've pulled out the sensor data for the archetypes, and Tam's very kindly highlighted in green Mandy. So this is the sensor data for Mandy's archetype. This is living room temperature, and we run from March over here on the my left, all the way to February. I've got that wrong, but in the summer you can see all the temperatures are really close. Most people's homes are similar temperatures. It's in the winter that you see the huge variation in temperature. And interestingly, Mandy stands out, as we kind of found out from the survey. She's got a really big difference. She probably has the biggest difference between the summer temperature and winter temperature in her home. That might be having health impacts. We certainly know a little bit about how temperature is starting to impact not just things like asthma and mould, but more broadly health conditions. And then, as Tam mentioned at the beginning, we've got guided conversation data. So we've got qualitative data about these people as well. This next slide's very busy, but we've been working to pull that guided conversation data over onto our archetypes. So we've pulled out 3 characteristics for each of the archetypes. I'll give you a moment just to have a quick look at those. Hopefully these are really starting to feel like real people without me kind of disclosing anything. It was quite interesting. I think most of us were reading about Mandy when I kind of looked at the data and thought that was a kind of unhappy life, bad mental health and well-being. When we looked at the interviews behind her, we suddenly find, well, she's out walking a lot. So she's meeting people in her neighbourhood. She knows what's going on there. And she's got a strong sense she belongs. She feels she belongs where she lives. So there's a slightly different angle suddenly coming out from the qualitative side of things. Archetype number 7 says it's complicated. She's my exception that proves the rule. So when we look at the data set, when we look at the survey, Sarah looks like one type of person, the cluster produces person. It happens to be one of the largest clusters in the cohort. But when we looked at the interviews in the background, and there were some of my colleagues here who had quite a lot of interviews to look through for Sarah, there seems to be at least kind of 2 or 3 different people within that cluster. So sometimes this is a scenario when the data doesn't tell us everything, when we've got to get into the qualitative side of things. So those characteristics keep and help us kind of bring these people to life. Why have we done this? What are we going to use them for? First of all, I'm hoping they're kind of multi-purpose. Like the penknife, you're going to be able to do lots of things with them. Hopefully it's going to help us raise awareness of the project. So it was great. Some of the data from the project is out there on a platform, but it's only really stats geeks like me that go and download it. We want people to engage with it in a bit of a new way. Hopefully it's going to enable business and academia really to kind of better understand the complexities of people's lives. We focus on what we can collect and what we can count, but that really isn't what people's lives are like. By doing techniques like this, we can bring things back together. We know some of our archetypes just don't have a lot of technology. They're not online. So if you want to reach that person with a solution, no point putting it out on Facebook. You need to find a paper way or something on the radio. We're hoping that it might inform kind of product design. You want to solve that issue. We can tell you a little bit about that kind of person and how you might want to design that product for them. And there's been quite a lot of work in academia about how kind of seeing somebody that's like you and working through how they change their behaviour helps you change your own behaviour. It kind of puts you a bit further away from that person. It doesn't still feel so personal if I say, well, actually, that person needs this happen. This kind of role modelling technique is now quite prominent in behaviour change. So those are some of the uses. I'm sure there are plenty more. Please come and chat to me at the back and come and test my ability to mind read. It's doing fairly well. It's been getting better. So I've been working on this one. Come and explore the archetypes. They're something we're going to be building on in the remainder of Smartline 1, and I'm sure Smartline 2 will do more with them.